You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. We've been discussing the UK's cost of living crisis. As a report by the New Economics Foundation has shown that over the last 2 years, the wealthiest 5% of families have seen their disposable income rise in the thousands. Meanwhile, over half of UK families have seen their disposable income shrink during this pandemic. So today we're asking, could new anti-COVID measures derail levelling up? To talk about this, we've got Alfie Sterling of the New Economics Foundation, their chief economist, Helen Barnard from Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and in the studio, as ever, friend of the show, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Helen, let's go back to you. So what would you want to see from the government? Joseph Rowntree Foundation has enormous influence, hugely respected. What's your message to Boris Johnson? As these new anti-COVID restrictions come in, there's going to be at least some, they're going to be around for a while. How do we ensure that government does everything it can in order to stop inequality widening even more?
Well, as Alfie said, I think they need to think about the underlying drivers that are trapping people, particularly those at the bottom, trapping them in these situations. So one thing is that what we've seen is that the support for people who are in work and on universal credit, that has been kept, but they have cut away the support for people who can't work. And those are the people actually who are the very poorest. So people who are disabled, who are caring full time for others, who have small babies, people who simply can't just go out and get a job. Support for those people has plunged right down as low as it's been for decades. And they are facing this incredibly high inflation with no extra support. So one thing I think they've got to put back in some support for those groups. I think the other thing is they need to think hard about not just the number of jobs we're getting and that are rebounding really fast, but the quality of jobs. So what we've seen in the pandemic is people who were on low-paid, insecure jobs were those who were losing jobs, losing income, weren't very well protected by furlough. There is a danger that as we come out, we just re-establish the same labour market, which has trapped lots and lots of people in really low-paid jobs that you can't live on. So the government needs to focus on, in local economies, how do you get better quality jobs and train the right people to do them? And the other thing is housing. You know, we've just had so many years where more and more people get stuck in these expensive private rented flats that they can't afford the rent on. They're cutting back on food to pay for rent, but they can't find an affordable place to rent. So actually doing things like building more social housing where we desperately need it, that would be good for the economy because, you know, it helps get jobs going, but also it helps to get away from one of those underlying things that pulls people into these dire situations of hardship at the bottom, which is really expensive housing that you can't get away from.
Now, we did ask the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities for a comment. We asked them to take part in this discussion, but apparently no one was available. Justin, Helen Barnard puts her finger on housing. That's a key part of levelling up, isn't it? But it's also a place where the private sector could help.
Now, this is a really key point, because there's no shortage of money in the private sector, but you need to make sure it's being funneled there. So where are the incentives to make sure you're not just investing it in the prosperous south, you can actually invest it in other areas and get sensible returns? For that, the government doesn't have to put in money. The government has to put in, the right sort of financial infrastructure. So going back to things which are really old-fashioned and out of date, like local investment bonds. Local investment bonds, which are focused on the region, investing in tangible items which can earn a good, steady income, like toll bridges, toll roads, all those sort of things.
So it's the private sector investing directly in public infrastructure projects for a low, heavily regulated return. It's not the private finance industry.
No, not that at all.
It's just the use of private sector money the way the Victorians did, into public projects.
Absolutely, and very quickly, if you want to try and make sure you keep those seats, you've got to show tangible delivery within 2 or 3 years. If you can start setting those up and pointing to those initiatives, those bits of infrastructure which can be funded, pointing to funds which people are investing in, which is actually then measuring how much money is going in, within 2 years, you can start seeing some confidence saying, actually, this is actually working in the regions. We don't need to actually be dependent upon the South East the entire time.
Alfie Sterling, going back to you, Helen, as I said, mentioned housing. Is that something that the New Economic Foundation wants to see? More social housing being built, what we once called council houses, that is low housing, subsidised rents for lower income and otherwise vulnerable households, a form of housing that's barely been built in recent years.
No, I think that's completely right. I think when you're trying to address cost of living, you need to look at two underlying drivers. One is how much cash do people have at their disposal to buy the things they need? And the other is what is the cost of the key things in life and what can government do to reduce those costs? Clearly on housing, a system where you just transfer money via renters to landlords to prop up a dysfunctional system is not the answer. It needs to be a better social housing offer. Private sector and public sector have a role to play in this, and the planning bill going through Parliament at the moment is an opportunity to do that. But I do want to take us back to this point about that underlying cash safety net as well, because I think to really simplify all of this, part of the problem during COVID was government tried to address problems with entirely new schemes like furlough, like the self-employed income protection scheme, because our existing safety net was so weak. I mean, at the moment, the basic unemployment payment is about 17% of average earnings. It's the weakest in our own history, and it's also the third or fourth worst among 38 advanced economies. So our basic safety net is not fit for purpose. And rather than creating entirely new schemes, you could do a lot by just restoring that. I mean, if you look at families on universal credit, on average, they've got about 50-60% of the income they need to meet the very basic minimum needs. They're well short. And so by investing in UCs, it's partly about £20 uplift. It's also things like, at the moment, families having inflation bite into their spending power because benefits are only operated from September inflation, yet we've seen this winter a big increase. But it's also about really meaningfully lifting up that income floor. So it's a trampoline for people, not a poverty trap. And it allows people to then bounce back off it into the labour market or to look after loved ones or whatever it is they need to do with support from society at large.
Helen Barnard, Alfie Sterling just mentioned inflation biting there. So often when we discuss inflation in the media, we want to hear from the City of London, we want to hear from people who've got big stocks and shares portfolios. But I'm sure when you see a high inflation number, you think cost of living, you think how lower income families are suffering most as prices go up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And particularly at the moment, because when you look at what people spend their money on, people on low incomes spend an enormous part of their budget on the things that are going up most, like energy bills and food prices. And so they're exposed to that inflation, but also they've got so much little they can actually cut out. Because if you're already right at the brink of being able to get by and put food on the table, prices go up and suddenly you find you're having to cut back more and more, and you're cutting back essentials because you don't have any luxuries to cut back on. And obviously what we've seen, the energy price cap go up this autumn, we're likely to see it go up even more in the spring. Now that's going to be hard for a lot of people, but for people on low incomes, it is just going to put unbearable strain on budgets that are already under this pressure.
Helen, thanks for all that. Helen Barnard of the Joseph Ramsey Foundation, Alfie Sterling of New Economics Foundation, well done on your new report. And, of course, Justin Urquhart-Stewart in the studio. One sentence answer, Justin. Inflation number comes out on Wednesday. It was 4.2% in October, and the November figure will be?
4.6%.
4.6%. Yep. You heard it here first on the money. Thanks to all my guests as ever. Now, we recently learnt that the Treasury blocked a £30 billion blueprint to electrify Britain's railways. Believe it or not, less than 40% of the UK's railways are currently electrified, compared with over 60% in Italy, Spain and Germany. And it tends to be northern regions and the Midlands which rely most on diesel trains, which are not only dirtier and slower, but also less powerful and accelerate more slowly. One reason why regional train services are so often overcrowded with shorter trains and less frequent. But it's not all doom and gloom on our railways, as there's also some good news from the North East. A new direct train service between Middlesbrough and London launches today, for the first time in 31 years. London North Eastern Railway, or LNER, says this is the first wave of new services between Teesside and London. The very first train left at 7:08 this morning, and our North East reporter, Rachel Sweeney, coffee in hand, was there.
The first direct service from Middlesbrough to London King's Cross in 30 years. This can only bring opportunity for us economically to this region, the northeast of England. It is fantastic news for the people who live here. We've seen record investments and global business deals in this area. So to be better connected to London is definitely an advantage for growth. You should have seen this morning the fanfare when the train arrived. That first service from Middlesbrough to London in 30 years. Now, although it's a very exciting time for people in this area, we do have to question why it's taken so long. Labour MP Andy MacDonald says he's been asking for this service since 2012. Maybe it's because of the levelling up agenda and the pressure there, or perhaps it's because Darlington has a new Treasury hub. It's in the government's interest to be better connected to the capital. Well, this is something that I put to the Managing Director of LNER, David Horn. Let's see what he says.
Well, the case for the service is improving all the time with the investment and the real shift towards relocation towards the north, of course. Physically, there have been works taking place at the station to accommodate the new service. And of course, it's taken a while for us to get our Azuma trains into full service. The Mayor has made investment of over £22 million into the station to enable this service to start.
It's in the government's interest now, isn't it, to really pay attention to this part of the world. It's really up and coming, there's so much investment, and now, of course, the Treasury.
Yes, indeed. I mean, there's a lot of focus on the Tees Valley and on the broader northeast, of course. The case is really strong. You know, there's parts of the country that are overheating in terms of the economy, so this is about rebalancing activity, but it's also, of course, about fundamentally providing a better service by train that's environmentally friendly, that enables people to connect between the towns and the cities across the country.
As well as the economic benefits, there are also environmental benefits. New trains will run using overhead electric wires, that's between London and Northallerton. And then diesel power to and from Middlesbrough. This is called bio mode, and apparently it will be significantly better for the environment. This area is attracting so much attention right now in terms of business, in terms of investment, and to be better connected to London will encourage growth. This area is firmly on the up, and this is further proof.
Rachel Sweeney there, our North East reporter in Middlesbrough. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview. And it's with Ian McCulloch, the former ITV commercial director who founded one of the UK's fastest selling gin brands. Before that, here's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Earlier this morning, the government also announced that around 10 people in England have been hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
Meanwhile, people trying to order lateral flow tests from the government website are being told there are no more home testing kits available. Boris Johnson, though, says there is a ready supply of lateral flow tests and recommended getting them in shops and pharmacies. In addition, the NHS says those experiencing waits online to book an appointment for their booster jab should try again tomorrow, as the website experiences high demand. In other news, the US president has declared a major disaster in Kentucky after a series of powerful tornadoes ripped through the state. Joe Biden announced additional aid will be provided to 8 counties to provide temporary housing and help fund home repairs. The governor says he fears more than 100 people may have died in Kentucky alone. The disaster has impacted more than 5 states across the country. 2 freight ships have collided off the southern coast of Sweden, leading to one of the vessels capsizing. At least 2 people have been reported as missing. Media reports that a British-registered Scot carrier and a Danish ship came together. Authorities in Sweden and Denmark say several Coast Guard vessels and helicopters have been sent to the scene. You're up to date. I'll have more for you at 2 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, on Friday, On The Money covered the economic implications of the government's new working from home advice, which officially begins today. But in some areas, such as Yorkshire, the mandate won't have as much of an impact as there are less office jobs. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin's been finding out more.
Well, of course, today is the day the government's work-from-home mandate comes into effect. 47% of the country was able to work at home, according to the Office for National Statistics. That's their data from April 2020. But, of course, that means 53% of the economy and workers did not work from home. And the number is even lower. Here in Yorkshire, it's just 37% who were able to work from home. Now, that's because we have fewer office jobs up here, more manufacturing and more key workers as well, people who have to be out working during the pandemic. Potentially, this could mean we see a faster rise in cases here in Yorkshire because obviously that working from home mandate will have less of an effect. And we saw this last year when many of those businesses which had to continue during the pandemic saw outbreaks of cases. We saw outbreaks at meat processing plants and bed factories, for example. So we are anticipating that most manufacturing industries will continue as normal with these new Plan B rules. A new survey from Make UK out today suggests that manufacturing is actually doing very well at the moment. Total manufacturing orders here in Yorkshire have increased by 38%, and that's a historically strong performance. Now, that's being put down to the reopening of the food and drink sector, as well as the demand for steel. Where I am at the moment, Rotherham and Sheffield is very much steel country, and that steel is being used for infrastructure projects, not just here in the UK, but around the world as well. But there are concerns about the cost pressures of this demand globally that's being released as the pandemic eased, and that the cost pressures on materials and supply of labour and so on could push prices up. But so far, the outlook for 2022 is looking very positive. But of course, all eyes are on the Omicron variant to see how that could impact on things. Now, the UK Health Security Agency said there were 1,239 new Omicron cases in the UK yesterday, which makes up almost 4 in 10 of the total number of Omicron cases we've seen in the UK as a whole. So far, we've seen just over 3,000 Omicron cases in the UK. But it's important to know that Omicron is still a small proportion of the total number of coronavirus cases. Yesterday we saw 48,000 coronavirus cases nationally, so Omicron makes up around 1 in 16 cases. The number of patients being admitted to hospital is still relatively low, 839 yesterday. That is the highest for a month, but it's far below the peak we saw last January of just over 4,000. Similarly, the number of deaths within 28 days of a positive COVID test also remains low at the moment. The last complete data for the 5th of December saw 107 deaths. Again, that's much lower than the 1,300 we saw at the peak last January. But of course, hospitalisations and deaths are what they call lagging indicators. So first of all, we see that rise in cases, then that feeds through to hospitalisations and deaths, and that's what the government is so concerned about. And of course, this government concern is not necessarily shared by all Conservatives. Many Conservative MPs want to wait until we know exactly how bad the Omicron variant is before bringing in these Plan B measures. As of last night, 67 Conservatives had confirmed they were going to vote against the plans, meaning the government will have to rely on Labour to get the Plan B measures through. Now, Labour have said they will back that, so these Plan B measures will be coming into force when MPs vote tomorrow. However, they may come at a very high price for the Prime Minister's relationship with his own party.
That was our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Kevin Larkin, reporting. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch about our earlier discussion on COVID measures and levelling up. Louise says, why aren't MPs asking the Prime Minister to produce a cost-benefit analysis over his current reaction to the various variant? Why not indeed? Anthony says, finance has to be targeted to those who need it and tax commuters who are working from home. That's a response to the discussion we just had on levelling up. And Alex says, for a country that has a negative balance of trade like ours, that means that we import more than we export, and Anthony's correct, we do. This has to cause inflation. COVID-19 spending could have been much better targeted to the poorest, but inflation caused by quantitative easing is what will derail levelling up. God, my viewers are so smart. Really good points there. Keep your emails coming. We read them all and we read out some of the best ones. Or tweet at GBNews. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, it's time for my daily interview series. Here it is. It's Money Talks. Now, my guest today is Ian McCulloch, the former commercial director of ITV, no less. After 27 years working for one of the UK's leading commercial broadcasters, Ian sought fresh pastures. And in 2014, he founded a gin business with his friend James Shelburne, as the pair dreamed of making a distillery next to a freshwater source where they could produce spirits using local ingredients. Now, Silent Pool Gin, based in Surrey, is one of the UK's fastest-selling gins, and it's sold across 32 countries. Here to tell us more about his business is Ian McCulloch. Great to see you, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
What made you take the plunge? You were obviously very successful. I knew you by reputation. You were the commercial director of ITV. Obviously a very good job, and you were very good at it. What possessed you to go and do something completely different?
I came out of ITV. It was a sort of regime change too many, so for all sorts of reasons left ITV. The bit that was always interesting about ITV on the commercial side was the stuff that made us money was the drama. And that was all about heads, or hearts, not heads.
Yeah.
It's the way you engage with the characters, the backstories, the sort of rounding out of what you see on screen. I drink, and it's one of those areas where you think, why do I select one brand over another?
Yeah.
And actually it's because they often engage hearts, not heads.
The imagination.
Yeah.
Your image of yourself.
Yeah. So we looked at... I was always fascinated by how the Scots owned Scotland. So you look at the way Scotch whisky, the imagery around it, you look at big moody hills, clear water, dark brooding hills, stormy seas, and they own that.
Whiskey was basically called Scotch, right? I mean, what about Irish whiskey? It's pretty good. But so prevalent was it, and such a good quality product, it became synonymous with whiskey everywhere.
Yeah. So I live in Surrey, near in the North Downs. Looked at that patch. It's a stunning piece of ground, and just wondered, could we capture in Surrey what the Scots capture in Scotland? So that's what we did. That's what we set out to do.
Now, this is, I wouldn't say it's a crowded space, but gin is certainly very trendy. Of course, you started your business back in 2013-14, so you were sort of early. But, you know, if you read Victorian literature, gin was known as mother's ruin. You know, people would end up in gin palaces if they were depraved and immoral. Dickens wrote about them and so on. And yet, in more recent years, gin has become very, very trendy, a lot more upmarket, and a lot more... a much more widely drunk spirit. How did that happen?
We're not living in a weird moment in history where everybody went gin mad. What happened was HMRC, who regulate us...
Yeah, the tax man.
...for 250 years said you could only have big buildings, big machinery, lots of cost. So families like Gordon's, Tanqueray, Booth's, Gilbey's were able to run it.
Yeah.
And then they deregulated it and said, actually, if you're what's called a fit and proper person, i.e. you don't diddle your taxes, you can have any size machinery that you like. And that brought the cost down and meant that new, innovative entrants could come in like us. And that's why it all went bang.
And is that what sparked both micro-breweries and micro-distilleries that become rather grown-up distilleries like yours now is?
Breweries happened first, but distilleries did the same thing. So that's why it all went bang. You've got much more interesting gins. We say to people, it's like painting with flavours. If you think of a flavour palette or a picture, you can paint a picture in somebody's mouth with the flavours. That's what you get.
Now, clearly, it's not like you didn't know commerce before. You were running a big company. ITV's a listed company, FTSE 250 company. But it must have been different. Suddenly, you were on your own. You didn't have an infrastructure of an office and a building. And, you know, when you rang up before, you were Ian McCulloch, the commercial director of ITV, and that mattered. Suddenly, you're all on your own. How did that feel, that kind of jump out of the plane moment?
Well, it's...
And how mad did your friends think you were?
When something goes wrong with a laptop or a printer and you think, well, can you ring IT and get somebody up to fix it?
You are IT.
You are IT.
You've got to put the curtains up,
mate. The drains are blocked. Right, you better get on your hands and knees and sort out the drains. You've got to do absolutely everything from the top down. So, yeah, it is a culture shock. We hire people, and the biggest culture shock we have is them transitioning from a big company where there's lots of infrastructure to a small one.
And you need, as a leader, you got everything on the line. You got your reputation on the line. A lot of people watching you when you left ITV. I remember when you left, it was quite a big story in the media because, you know, it was a big role, and you were leaving it to do something completely different. There must have been moments where you kind of looked in the mirror or looked at a kind of imaginary camera just over there and thought, what am I doing here? Why have I done this?
We were very lucky and the whole thing snowballed. So our first year's forecast was 4,500 bottles. We did 45,000 bottles. Our timing was really lucky, but suddenly it went bang. And it was a bit like holding a tiger by the tail because people love the packaging, it's teal and copper, it's a genuine story. We draw our liquid or our water from the pool. It just went bang. We touched a nerve. We used to joke that people in Surrey were filling their swimming pools with it because the consumption locally just went crazy. And then we started exporting. We got into Waitrose. We got into Majestic.
How difficult was that? Because for many people watching this who have small businesses, it's cracking open those big mainstream grown-up retailers that's hard.
The thing that people forget is all the buyers live somewhere. They have daughters, they have wives, they have grandparents, they have friends. Once you market locally, people start saying to some of these buyers, you really should try this. And if you have to have great liquid, they all pick it up. We got a call from duty free at Heathrow, or Gatwick actually, saying we've had a load of people through asking whether we could sell it. And that was an easier way of getting in than you trying to pitch to get in there.
So obviously Silent Pool Gin, it's based in Surrey. Did local people in Surrey, just south of London, quite a prosperous area, Did they sort of take pride in it? Did they seek it? Was Surrey the centre of where the popularity happened? And is that where you first got it into the supermarkets?
Yeah, we were really lucky. The local people embraced it massively. There are breweries locally. I think the difference with distilling is it's a bit like alchemy. And there was a sense of there's a bunch of naughty boys sort of in the woods somewhere making hooch.
Should be doing their homework.
Yeah, and we weren't. It's all legal. But they absolutely loved the fact that we sell the Surrey Hills. So when we go overseas, we sell Guildford High Street, we sell Sheer, we sell the rolling hills of Surrey. And they took us to their chests or their bosoms, and off we went. They absolutely loved it. We were lucky in timing, though. We were one of the first ones out. There are a lot more brands out there now.
There are. We've had Didsbury Gin on here, a bunch of guys up in Manchester who are much earlier in their journey than you, but there's got similarities between the conversation I'm having now and the conversation I had with them earlier. Have you expanded beyond regular gin? Do you have flavoured gins, infused gins?
We make flavoured gins. We've just released a rare citrus gin. We've got an ultra premium gin in development that should be out soon. We make vodka. We make with local British fruit. We have a lady in Kent who supplies us with fruit. So we make Green Gage gin, Damson gin, if it's available. We won't bring fruit in, so it needs to be English fruit.
So everything is from UK?
Once it's run out, it's gone. Then we'll make something else.
OK. So what's the future for a company like yours? Tell me how your workforce has grown. Tell me how your P&L has grown. And who owns the company overall?
We set it up, 4 of us set it up in an EIS scheme. When we started, so you risk your own money, although you get some tax benefits from the government.
That's like an entrepreneurial shell.
Yeah,
you can invest your money and you get tax.
Yeah, so if you pay income tax and you put £1 in, the government gives you the tax that you paid back.
Yeah.
So
to encourage entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but you have to risk it, and it is a risk. We employ probably 30 people now. We have a field Salesforce agency, Salesforce based in London. We're now in 35 countries. We've got brand ambassadors overseas. We have distributors in every country. The challenge in the business is sales and marketing. So 85% of what we do is trying to turn gin into money. Because until we can pay the electricity bill with cases of gin, you've got to convert it into cash.
And what happened to your business during lockdown? You could carry on manufacturing.
Yeah.
I guess people drank a bit more during lockdown, didn't they? The figures
They
show.
drink when they're happy and they drink when they're sad.
Yeah.
The government declared that it was an essential service, so that was good. We very quickly started making hand sanitizer. So in the end, we made about 80,000 bottles of hand sanitizer, half of which we gave away. So we grew last year, which was unusual. The on-trade obviously shut. Online went absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
That's stabilised a bit now. Off-trade, off-licences could stay open, so they were seen as essential services. So we managed to navigate that one in not too bad a shape in the end.
And what's your advice, Ian, to people who think they may have a business in them, but they're a bit nervous about making the leap? They're a bit nervous about that photocopier moment when there's no one to repair the photocopier and you're everything from strategist to main investor to photocopier repair person.
The key advice is probably know what you don't know, but know where to find the answer. To be honest, I can get jammed paper out of a copier, but at the point where you think, OK, I need a man to start unpacking this copier, you do need to get the right people in.
Yeah.
So get the right people in on marketing, designing the bottle, sales, distribution. At the moment, the logistics for overseas is horrific, so get people in who understand it. So knowing what you don't know or knowing when to stop and pull somebody in is very important.
Ian, it's been great to talk to you. Good luck with the business.
Thank you.
Ian McCulloch of Silent Pool Gin. Oh, look out for it. Thanks for coming in on the show.
Take care.
You've been watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining me today. We'll be back for more economics, business and consumer news tomorrow at 1 p.m. You lucky people. Thanks for watching today. I'll be back in just a moment with Gloria De Piero. But this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. A three-way split with the weather this Monday. Bright and blustery across the far north. Some rain across parts of northern England and Wales in particular. In the far south, it's mild, but it's pretty murky. The three-way split caused by this waving weather front straddling across the UK. This low brought some very strong winds through the night and first thing across the Northern Isles, easing down a bit but staying blustery here. Showers across the Highlands, but much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry and bright. Then this damp zone covering parts of Yorkshire through to Lancashire and across North and West Wales, staying fairly soggy here. A bit damp and drizzly in the southwest, much of the south dry but predominantly cloudy. But it is mild here. Temperatures could get into the teens, whereas certainly single figures further north. Add on that wind and it feels pretty fresh. And the showers continuing to come in across the Highlands and the Western Isles through the evening. The rain will trickle south, so turning damp and dank through South Wales and the Midlands for a time overnight. Some mist and fog is possible, might just about drop down to freezing in one or two places, but certainly most towns and cities just about hovering above freezing and well above freezing in the south, staying very mild. But staying quite murky here, damp and drizzly for southern England, South Wales during Tuesday. Rain and light drizzle on and off throughout. Something a bit brighter for northern England, North Wales compared to today. Further rain coming in across western and northern parts of Scotland. But again, much of Northern Ireland, eastern Scotland will be dry and bright. Temperatures here again close to average, but again quite mild in the south with temperatures as high as 11 or 12 Celsius. Through Tuesday evening, not a great deal of change. We've got a line of rain across the far northwest, some drizzly conditions over hills across western Scotland and North Wales, but otherwise most places dry, and that's how it's looking for much of the rest of this week. High pressure moving in, so most places dry from Tuesday onwards, often cloudy and increasingly could have some problems with fog.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's time to discuss the big issues of the day with me, Gloria De Piero, and Liam Halligan.
Last night, Boris Johnson announced his huge booster jab drive, moving his target of getting all over 18s vaccinated with 3 doses forward by a month.
But he admitted this will mean other NHS treatments and appointments will be pushed back and delayed to allow full priority to the vaccine rollout.
So today we're asking, is this the right thing to do? Should we allow the NHS to put COVID first yet again? All that to come. But first, here's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 2 o'clock. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister has confirmed at least one patient has died with the Omicron variant of coronavirus in the UK. Early this morning, the government announced that around 10 people in England had been hospitalised with the new strain.
Sadly, yes, Omicron is producing hospitalisations, and sadly at least one patient has now been confirmed to have died with Omicron. So I think the idea that this is somehow a milder version of the virus, I think that's something we need to set on one side and just recognise the sheer pace at which it accelerates through the population.
Meanwhile, people trying to order lateral flow tests from the government website are being told there are no more home testing kits available. But Boris Johnson says there is a ready supply of lateral flow tests and recommended instead getting them in shops and pharmacies. Well, in addition, the NHS says those experiencing waits online to book an appointment for their booster jabs should try again tomorrow, as the website is experiencing high demand. The Ministry of Defence has said around 750 servicemen and women will help deliver boosters and coordinate the rollout in England and Scotland. The Prime Minister also warned the rollout could be at the cost of other medical appointments. Virologist at the University of Warwick, Professor Lawrence Young, told GB News that these vaccinations will have a serious impact on people waiting for other treatments.
It's a real dilemma. It really is. And so I think we just have to be really concerned that what's going to happen over the next few weeks in this massive drive is going to mean we take our eye off the ball, and that backlog that was just starting to get to grips with that backlog or in GP practices and in hospitals is going to be further delayed, and that will have significant implications.
Thousands of people in England are now working from home as part of the government's Plan B measures, which came into force today. Transport for London says it saw a reduction in usage this morning, with an 18% decrease in journeys made on the tube, whilst bus services saw a 5% decline. Chief Economic Strategist Jared Lyons told GB News that working from home will hit the economy.
Pandemic's latest variant will probably knock the economy in December, in January, possibly into February as well. So there will be a temporary hit to the economy, but that should not result in permanent changes to policy. So we need to weather the storm and hopefully move as quickly as possible through these restrictions.
The US president has declared a major disaster in Kentucky after a series of powerful tornadoes ripped through the state. Joe Biden announced